So in this video, we were asked, what exactly is it that God is critiquing about Babylon and the Babylonian Gentile culture, pagan culture, in chapter 3, in this third story of the book? And the simple answer is this is a critique of patriotism, or what you might call ultimate loyalties. The three men did not reject Babylon altogether. They were quite loyal servants of Babylon. They participated in the government loyally. This is partly what irritated Nebuchadnezzar so much. They were happy to serve Babylon's overarching causes and participate without defying direct orders by the king. But that had a limit. They weren't going to simply obey Nebuchadnezzar in every single circumstance. There was one ultimate loyalty that was beyond their loyalty to Nebuchadnezzar. And of course, if you're Nebuchadnezzar, you don't like this idea. If you're running the government, if you're running the kingdom, you don't want to think that your executive power is limited. You want to think that you can control the whole of your kingdom. And everybody, if nothing else, by fear alone, will in the end bow the knee, whether you need to use the law, whether you need to use money, or if necessary, whether you need to threaten people's lives, literally. You can control, you can shepherd. And so this is obviously what Nebuchadnezzar thinks he can do. And in this case, the three men are showing to Nebuchadnezzar that that their loyalty is to, ultimate loyalty is to something higher. And you remember when the devil was in the garden and he came to Adam and Eve and tried to seduce Eve into thinking that God was not fundamentally good, God was not fundamentally trustworthy and wise, and that he really wasn't worthy of life's ultimate loyalties. Okay, so that's similar to the kind of test that the men were having to endure. And of course, these three men, we just sort of take it for granted almost as if, well, they were saved through this, so, everything was just fine. But if you look here at what it says in verse 17, it's very specific. If this be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us, and he will deliver us. But, then they add, if not. That is to say, they believe God will deliver them, but they really don't have a guarantee from God. They don't have any assurance from heaven. An angel didn't come and assure them, nothing. And you can imagine their families standing around as they're about to make what is a fatal decision. There would be immense pressure to, just go along with the pageantry, just externally just bow the knee. I mean, who cares really in the end? As long as internally you believe in the true God and you're loyal to the one true living God, who cares if you bow the knee to Marduk? He's a false god anyway, and so on. So there'd be immense pressure on them to just buckle, just briefly, ever so briefly, just to buckle. But of course, by refusing to do so, God is sending a message through them to Nebuchadnezzar of how impotent and powerless in the end Nebuchadnezzar really is. That in this case, he has men in front of him who everything is being taken away from them and put on one side of a fence. Everything is there, not just their wealth and their positions and prosperity, but their families, their children. Everybody's on one side. Everything is on one side of a fence. And the only thing on the other side of the fence is their God, is Yahweh. And Nebuchadnezzar is forcing a choice. Are you really going to choose Yahweh over every other thing, including you? Your own life is on the other side of the fence. And of course, the men are resolved that in the ultimate framework of the universe, of reality rather, that it's not a loss for them to remain loyal to God, but rather God will gift them, if necessary, with resurrection. The final story in this book, the book of Daniel, has a vision of the future resurrection of those who believe God, who follow God, and so on. So these men believed this, and they were prepared to die. And it says here in verse 23, these three men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down into the burning fiery furnace. The people next to them that threw them in were incinerated because of the extra heat in the furnace. And these particular men, as they began to fall, probably didn't immediately reckon with the fact that they weren't immediately being incinerated likewise, but were falling into what for them must have felt like sure death, certain death. So again, this isn't just play. This was a real practical decision with absolute consequences in this world and in the next. But it turns out that is not what's going to happen. They're not going to die. But then the fact that they're thrown in is interesting. How exactly is it that God saves them? He's going to deliver them. But how precisely does God save them? How does he deliver them? And what is the lesson that Nebuchadnezzar takes away from the experience, which you can find in the final verses as we get another comment at the end of each of these stories, right, is a comment by Nebuchadnezzar. In chapter 2, there was a comment by Nebuchadnezzar. Now in chapter 3, there's another comment by Nebuchadnezzar. What does he take away? What does he emphasize in what he's learned from the experience? So best wishes, and we'll see you next time.